Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We are going to do our monthly, bi-monthly, and sometimes tri-monthly sit-down, get-together with Uncle Gordy. So get your sleeping bags ready, get around the fire, wherever you may be. It's springtime. Hope you're out having a good time. And even if you're home, get on the couch and get ready to hear some amazing truths. Gordon Duff has been presenting. You all right, Gordon?
Yeah, I'm fine.
All right. Sound like you're choking on something.
No.
Gordy has been presenting some searing truths lately that if he were a much younger man, he probably wouldn't dare do. I have been overwhelmed with some of the things he's been saying and stunned. I had a hunch, but we're hearing them now from a source that is utterly unique on the Internet and elsewhere. So welcome back, Uncle Gordy.
Well, Jeff, it's good to be on, and although this will be a standalone archive, I'm following up after David Duke, which is one of the most interesting people, even by my estimation.
David is one of a kind. So are you.
We talk occasionally, and
yeah,
he can be a difficult character, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Which so could I, but he's got his own way about it.
It's called variety is the spice of life, isn't that what it is?
He's tough as nails.
Yeah.
There's that. As for what you were saying, this show would be, what is the date today? May 2nd?
Yeah.
Yeah, May 2nd, 2018. There are things probably that and I have to assume I'm dealing with new listeners, but I've spent most of my life, I was trained as an academic in international relations at several Midwestern.
He was also trained as a U.S. postal letter carrier, but we won't necessarily spend much time on that.
I'm a Marine Vietnam. Raised in let's say a poor working class, barely white family, German immigrants, grew up in a neighborhood full of Poles and Hungarians and Russians. Grew up in a household where those were the my dad spoke German, Russian, and Polish, and a little bit English too. And like the time did a lot of screaming and hitting, which is where the world came from. Member of the Communist Party. And
boy, do we.
The path that it set me on, basically, college, worked at Bell Labs, which could go right out of 3 Days of the Condor.
That's interesting. Bell Labs. That's sci-fi, ET, UFO, ultra-advanced nanotech, and all the rest of it. And
was one of those probably too smart people, damaged in a lot of ways, thought to be easily controllable, charismatic. It was long believed that I was a charismatic sociopath, but a useful sort of person. And that led me into to an extent, the inner circles of America's intelligence agencies at a very, very early age. The first recruiting meetings I had were 1969. In Vietnam, the CIA sent people out to talk to me, and when I actually wrote some of this up, two odd things happened to me, which can explain some of the things about Trump or the Bush family, especially George W. Bush. I had this organization wanted to clean up a CV for me, so they told me they were going to graduate me from Annapolis. Now I'd never been to Annapolis. I'd actually never been to the town. I wasn't even sure where it was.
That's pretty funny.
But they were going to hand me a ring, and then a list of people who were my friends in Annapolis, and they were going to be my roommates, classmates while I was there.
Got it.
And they had selected 6 of them to swear that they'd been with me the whole time.
Right.
But
that's like Obama. Obama at Columbia Law School or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And the other one they were going to
nobody ever saw him on campus, but he's got people that can vouch that he was there. All right.
The other one they were going to do is to give me a graduate degree from Yale. Now that was another one. As long as I promised not to go to Yale, and I was going to be included in class photos and just photoshopped into everything.
That's cute.
And any number of people were going to swear to it that
they'd
seen me.
Basketball star, star halfback, number one on the varsity tennis team. You were going to be there. I get it.
Yeah, I was. That was promised as well, and along with that, membership in an unnamed secret society, which today I believe we would call Skull and Bones.
Oh my!
Yeah.
Oh my!
This was as time goes on, and this is what I've had to deal with in my own life. I sometimes risk taking myself too seriously. Every 10 years, I have to stop and remember who I was 10 years before and how many of the things I had believed turned out to be total bullshit.
That's a very, very interesting worldview and a very good way to apply yourself to this brief passage we call life. I like that.
Yeah, one of the areas, and if any of you are close to Google, because I have a war with Google Corporation.
Can't imagine why.
Those of you who use Google as a search engine are unaware that Google has two groups. One is Google Idea Groups, and the other is Google Jigsaw, that are military contractors, intelligence contractors, and are involved in regime change. But not just that. They exist to name who our next leaders are, to smear or destroy those who refuse to buckle under to them. And if you don't buckle under Google Corporation itself won't do anything to you. Now, organizations tied to Google Corporation may run your car into a pole or kill your kids or bankrupt you or certainly work to destroy your reputation.
See, now we have a working definition of the term that we all use when we say they.
Oh, they. The they. If you ever say, if you're going to talk about those 1,000 points of light, that one world order that you were going to learn to fear, they have finally created a name for themselves. They is Google.
Isn't that funny? That's funny.
And behind Google is its evil little toadish stepson, the Zuckmeister from Fakebook. And
the toadish stepson. That's great. That's great.
And yet, while you are out there, if you have a Gmail address, if you use search engines, and they all piggyback off Google, every time you go to a website, their ads are scanned. If you look at the bottom of the page, you can see the Google software being piled into your computer, the cookies going into your computer, watching everything you do. And it's not to sell you a new car or, ads for Duluth underwear or whatever it is. And none of it is intended for the kind of outcome that you'd like. As time goes on, and Americans out here, I live, right now I'm living in West Michigan in what had been the genuinely right-wing Christian Republican end of the world. This was the headquarters of Christian Zionism. And what we've watched go on here, essentially, is we've watched people wake up. David Duke, who's, I guess, still alive, but were he dead, he'd be smiling in his grave today, because you meet Christians nowadays, the ones who used to, evangelical Christians, who did nothing but cry over the Holocaust and cry over Israel and worry about the evil Palestinians.
And there's 40 million of them, Christian Zionists.
Sneaking up on those poor Jews and whatever happens when you've been snuck up on, are now starting to realize that Israel is a country run by homicidal sociopaths.
Maniacs. All the evidence that Bibi presented, by the way, apparently stemmed from before that infamous Iran nuclear deal was even made. Talk about proof positive that they're still at it, eh?
Well, what Jeff's talking about here, since we're lacking context, but I wasn't on last hour, and I'm hoping you guys just stay hooked up to the Rense network and buy stuff. I'm not entirely kidding here either.
Thank you. No, our sponsors make all the difference. Thank you.
It's the only way we can keep him on the air, and without Jeff.
And remember, I'm on borrowed time, so yes.
Yeah. Oh, not like me, but close. I'd take care of you. I've got a room in the basement for you. Now, I do admit there are steel eyelets attached to the walls in that room, and there's a big steel chair bolted to the floor, but it's a room for you just the same.
A room without a view. Okay, well, that's it. See, Gordy lives in it's a converted lighthouse that told the Edmund Fitzgerald which direction to turn. I remember now. Isn't that it?
Yeah. It's very much the case, and I do hop on down to that Mariners Church. Nobody would remember the song anymore. It's been that long.
I know.
But the issue with Bibi, now Bibi refers to Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, who may be about as big an asshole as exists on planet Earth, and that's quite a lot of thought to get to that point.
If he ain't number one, he's right up there, there.
He's pretty much right at and for me, we have a number of friends in common. VT's one of my deputy editor, our military editor, is Colonel James Hankey, who was attaché to Israel, and he was in Israel with his wife for 3 years when Netanyahu served in the Knesset. They lived next door to each other and saw each other every day. Jeff Smith, our science editor, was an inspector with the IAEA and is famous for being at that meeting with Netanyahu at Fink's Bar in Jerusalem when Netanyahu, to a live microphone, explained exactly how he was going to destroy the United States and milk the Christian world into obscurity, how he was going to take us down in his plan for it, which I believe we're seeing him do right now.
He's pushing. He's pushing. He's a pushing.
The issue with Bibi.
Oh, you did see the. Excuse me. I've got to interject here. You did see the story, of course, at Veterans Today. That for those of you listening who did not, Bibi Benjamin Netanyahu has been given full authority to declare war on anyone he wants. All he has to get is the approval of Avigdor Lieberman, his Minister of Defense. That's it.
And Lieberman is the only guy that may possibly be a bigger asshole.
One. Yes, that's it.
You've got to understand them. Just go into Google, and then Google Images, and pull these guys up and just take a good look at them.
Look in their eyes, okay? Yeah. Look carefully. You won't have to look for long.
That if as a parent, if you were going to have children that you knew would grow up to be these guys,
jeez,
would you row them out to the middle of a lake and test them out in swimming when they were like a month old?
You want to see reptilian eyes? Go look. All right, just go look.
Yeah, this is ultra creepy. But here's the issue on that. And we'll call it crazed attempt, again, by Netanyahu to sell the idea that Iran has a nuclear program. Now, the first thing that happened within hours, all of the leaders of the NATO countries said this is the terms that were used by two national leaders, he's an idiot or he's totally insane. And these are people normally that are, show up for Holocaust Remembrance Day and kiss a lot of behind.
Oh, yeah.
Tushy, a lot of tush here. They, a lot of smacking at the tush with these guys, but they couldn't handle it anymore. Except one person in this world stood up and said, every word is true, and I believe Mike Pompeo, our new illiterate Secretary of State.
I like it. Now, Pompeo or Pompeo. It doesn't matter. It's pompous, okay? Pompous without cause.
And what we saw, of course, is Netanyahu, out of pride, sold his new stooge, Mike Pompeo, sold him down the river, made him look like a fool. Now he can't go to any NATO capital because he has laid out his level of discernment. That he is an utter and absolute puppet, the mind of a chicken.
Yeah. It's more than a lapdog if you get the drift. Okay.
Now, if we want to know why Tillerson, the former CEO of Exxon, lost his job, and I'll use the radio language on this. Tillerson for one reason. He called Trump a frigging idiot, and then didn't use the term frigging. And then when it came time 2 days later to apologize for it, he also said, frig that. And
not to forget what John Kelly just said. I'm not sure if he used the word frig in there, but he got the second part right.
Well, the issue we're dealing with more than anything else isn't necessarily Trump. It's just that none of us genuinely can tell who's in charge of anything.
No, nobody knows. No, it's absolutely who's in charge. Absolutely.
I sit through meetings every day, including, talking to the Iranians, talking to the Russians, talking to the Italians, talking to the French, and these aren't reporters I'm talking to, And there's Gordon, who the hell's running that place? We don't know. We don't have a clue. But whoever it is, tell them to stop. We can't take it anymore. Things we did learn this week inexorably, gossipy stuff, good stuff. We received a packet explaining 2 issues about Trump, and this was unsupported packet. Inside the packet was evidence that Donald Trump, evidence is, what is evidence? Because evidence could be alternative facts. So and skepticism is fair. Not believing everything you hear is fair. Now, I won't say that many people who actually get their information on the internet use that kind of discernment, but I'm advocating they begin. 2 things. One, that Donald Trump converted to Judaism in 1981, and we have that confirmed. And converting to Judaism is not necessarily a bad thing. It's an interesting and obscure religion with a lot of crazy beliefs. But what the hell? People in some countries worship the shark god. So if he wants to do this, get himself a yarmulke.
All right, remember the cargo cults? All right.
Yeah, and hey, I celebrate the Jewish holidays with friends. None of us take it seriously, but we light candles, eat crappy food, and go through some of the stuff. Ceremony's fine. The other thing is Donald Trump's, and this is what we found, Donald Trump's relationship with women. And Donald Trump's relationships with women, now that's an interesting one, because what we found is that Donald Trump hired a group of publicists many years ago to spread rumors about his sexual prowess, all of the women he had sex with. Now, the PP tape, this is the
dossier.
The Christopher Steele dossier. Imagine this. Now, let's if you're a man's man, and Jeff's a man's man, hell, I'm even a man's man, for all that's worth.
Well, you got a motorcycle that proves it.
Yeah, I have a couple of them, but let's go to Moscow. Let's say I'm the man's man, and I've got $40 billion or $8 billion or no money at all, and I lie about it all the time, but whatever is true. I'm in Moscow. I'm in a hotel room with the absolute number 1 hookers in all of virgins, absolutely beautiful, huge breasts, and I've got every drug imaginable. I've just taken 6 or 7 Viagra. And what do I have them do? I have them stand up and urinate on a bed. Now, I don't have sex with them. No, they urinate on the bed. Anything else? No, they urinate on the bed.
That's right.
Yeah. What we found is that no female has ever had sex with Donald Trump who wasn't paid to say she had sex with Donald Trump.
She's talking about a PR campaign. That takes the cake. Yeah.
And what we have records of is Donald Trump being invited to parties where he would walk around a party and note. And we're not saying not have sex with women, instead he would grab people's crotches, women, he would grab their breasts, walk up and grab them, push them around, try to kiss them, and that would be movie stars or hotel employees. Do it in as public a way as possible. Make sure that wherever you went, there would be this warning. Donald Trump can't keep his hands off women. And after the break, we're going to explain why it was so desperately important for Donald Trump to have people believe, while he sat on the Howard Stern show night after night, bragging about how large his penis is, what the real truth about Donald Trump.
What a teaser.
And we found out. Hold on till after the break, and we'll be right back.
Jeez, I don't have to do anything. We'll be back. Okay, let's get right back to it. Tonight's part 2 of Uncle Gordy's Campfire Stories of the strange, the bizarre, the macabre, and sometimes the downright creepy.
Well, Jeff, we could tell this as a tale.
I think we can.
Yeah. Sometime, let's say after World War II,
narrows it right down.
A young man came back from the war named Joe McCarthy. He was a tail gunner in a B-24. George McGovern, by the way, the candidate for president back in 1972, from the Watergate.
Might have won if he had a mustache, by the way. Anyway.
Yeah, but he was a pilot. He was a B-24 pilot in World War II. Well, tail gunner Joe had decided that he was going to cleanse the country of the evils of communism. And it was his belief, and to some degree rightly so, that the State Department was filled with lefties. And in his effort to clean the United States of communists, he attached himself to a young New York attorney named Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn, among other things, young, energetic, psychopathic, Jewish, gay, outwardly gay. Cohn used his position as real second in command or legal counsel for the Senate hearings and as advisor to the House Committee on Un-American Activities, which began the worst witch hunt this country has ever seen, which ripped this country apart, ripped Hollywood apart.
Which also included young Robert Kennedy, by the way.
Robert Kennedy as an attorney.
Yep.
It's where we learned that Ronald Reagan had at one time been a member of the Communist Party, and to get himself out of trouble, turned in anyone that he went to a Communist Party meeting with, and those people, which would have been authors such as Dalton Trumbo, who, for those of you who may not be familiar with the book, Johnny Gets His Gun, a powerful anti-war book written about a veteran whose face was blown off and was locked in a closet at a VA hospital where he was eaten on, kept alive, but was slowly eaten away by rats. It's not a cheerful book. Perhaps you don't want to read that.
It was a comedy, wasn't it?
A comedy.
Uh-huh. A black comedy.
Made into a film in the 1970s. But one guy went the other direction, brought Dalton Trumbo, who was a great screenwriter, back into the mainstream. And that man was Kirk Douglas. Dalton Trumbo won an Academy Award for writing the script to the film Spartacus. And that was the first of the blacklisted people that Reagan and others and Roy Cohn had removed from Hollywood for excessive conscience, which is a big crime in Hollywood, as we know. Roy Cohn got into a bit of trouble because Roy had a boyfriend who was an airman, and that's an E-2 serving in the U.S. Air Force. So Cohn contacted and it was at the time the Army Air Force, the Secretary of the Army, and had his boyfriend transferred to Washington where he could join the House Un-American Activities Committee as an advisor. And his real reason for being there, of course, was to as a personal escort for his, and which is easier to understand.
You think about the parallels with J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, and Unusual, but not so. Not in Washington.
When this became publicly known, and when President Eisenhower, during one of his rare moments of courage, stood up to Joe McCarthy and said that the United States is going to stop eating itself alive, McCarthy moved to New York, set up a law firm there, and became consigliere. How do you pronounce this? Out of the Godfather? Consigliere for the real mafia. The real mafia in New York, and you get a pretty good idea of it if you watch the film Once Upon a Time in America. Strongly suggest, if you haven't seen the film, see the film. The real mob has always been Meyer Lansky's mob. Meyer Lansky ran Murder Incorporated. Meyer Lansky ran all of the gambling. And Cohn and his gang were all secondary, minor players in Meyer Lansky's. Well, Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel set up the town of Las Vegas, set up America's gambling, essentially. There's another TV show that talks about this extensively is Boardwalk Empire. And if you hadn't watched that, I think it's an HBO show, but I think it's sitting out on I think it's on Amazon Prime right now. But it's a good watch as well. So as we move into the 1970s, we have a New York, which is a major, and there are two major cities of gay bathhouse scenes, and that would be New York and San Francisco. We have a town, as we move from the 70s into the 80s, awash with cocaine, awash with clubs, discos, open sex, open gay sex, and an open gay sex scene. It gets even better, and was a business partner with Prescott Bush, the brother of George Herbert Walker Bush, and then later was partners in a company manufacturing speedboats. Meyer Lansky was sold, and they're still being sold, by the way. Lansky died in 82. But his company is still alive and well and supplies patrol boats to the Department of Homeland Security.
Too funny.
But the gay scene in New York in the late 70s and the early 80s attracted young gay males from Yale.
We're getting back to Donald Trump here with his big hands, so don't go away.
Yeah. So Roy Cohn ran all the mobs in New York. He was the man in charge of America's organized crime. And he took a shine to two young, attractive gay men. Now, if you ask about Roy Cohn, the expert on Roy Cohn really is Roger Stone, one-time theoretical advisor to, he says he advised everyone. Well, what Roger Stone says about Cohn basically is this, that Cohn really wasn't gay. He just liked having sex with attractive young men.
I can understand that.
From wealthy, powerful families.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, Gordon.
That he would bring down from New Haven, Connecticut, and take around to Studio 54 or elsewhere, show them off, and then have sex with them.
But that doesn't make him gay. That's your point, right?
Yeah. Right. And two of his favorite young gay men have become presidents of the United States.
Oh, my.
Who as young men came to New York and hit the clubs and became lovers of the head of at the time of America's Jewish organized crime mafia, the real mafia. And that's, of course, George W. Bush, who was married to. Now, we have things we could say about the wife here, and a lot of those stories are carried, but frankly, if I repeat stories where I don't have confirmations, it's very wrong, and I don't. I know she was involved, that her family had hired a boyfriend for her. The assumption is that she was a lesbian. I have no evidence to that effect at all. Zero. But I do know that she ran him over with a car and killed him. That's another thing.
That's another.
And that it was covered up. But that can be checked on. You know, for those of you who've got busy little fingers and that relationship with the Gargle Corporation, you can do this yourself. The other attractive young man seen on Roy Cohn's arm is Donald Trump. And when one talks about Studio 54 and in the private rooms of Studio 54 where Donald Trump would, who just can't control his mouth, would talk about being in the private rooms and having people bent over a table having sex in the private rooms of Studio 54, he's failing to mention the private gay rooms of Studio 54.
Just a three-letter word, Gordy. Just a little word.
Now, the issue here, of course, that probably of those that are listening, that 30% of the people listening here could be gay or bisexual or bi-curious or whatever.
47 different gender choices now you can make.
And God only knows. I served as a Marine in Vietnam. I was on, one of the landing ships I was on was LPD 7, the USS Cleveland, built in Bay City, Michigan, 1966. And more than a few members of the crew held that clinger sort of thing going on. Lots of, bunny slippers, and there was a lot of that. Plus, I was with the 26th Marines, and we had several in a combat unit. We had openly homosexual Marines in a combat unit, and the basic deal is, if they're not forcing you, leave it alone. And I'm not going to bring their names up, and I hope they're okay. But we learned to live with it and get over it. As simple as that. And they were there. Well, Mr. Trump was not, or Rush Limbaugh, who had or my college friend John Engler, former governor of Michigan, who got out of the draft because of his weight. So many people. Now, Engler was not a war hawk, so I don't blame him. He was a nice kid, but we have so many war hawks who, Dick Cheney and his 6 deferments. The issue we're dealing with here is Donald Trump. And let's take a look at George W. Bush, and we can see how the game is played. Now, if we take the clock back here to Larry Flynt, does anybody remember when Larry Flynt came up with the names of 5 women that George W. Bush got pregnant and forced them to have abortions? Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5. And then to silence them, all of them were bought new homes. Not 1 new home, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 new homes. And none of them, although their names were given to Larry Flynt, none of them would come forward other than to prove that George W. Bush was a manly man. Now, nobody had ever accused him of being a manly man before. Well, no. we're dealing with this,
especially not the photo editor of the National Enquirer, and wasn't that it?
Yeah,
Weekly World, one of those. Anyway.
Yeah, the National Enquirer, and that's an interesting point also because the photo editor of frankly,
there were 3 papers in that building. Yeah.
The editor-in-chief. You're talking about the anthrax killing, aren't you?
That's it. Yep.
Yes. In order to keep the story of George W. Bush being gay away from the public, and the National Enquirer had the evidence.
They had the photos.
They had the photos of him taking it through the Hershey Highway, as it were. They were anthraxed. The National Enquirer.
They shut that building down after the photo editor received an envelope with white powder in it, which turned out to be the real McCoy. The building was shut down. There were 3 so-called tabloids published there. All 3 tabloids.
In Lantana, Florida, right off Highway
That's
number
right.
1.
That's right. And during that month that the building was shut down to decontaminate it, those files were all scrubbed and removed. Now, the photo editor was the only one who died from the anthrax attack. All right? He's gone.
And this is a little bit of evidence of just one little issue. And the other one, of course, if you want to see And these photos are out there, so you can go into Gargle Corporation and just type in Donald Trump and Roy Cohn and bring up images, and you'll see Donald Trump and Roy Cohn photographed. Now, they're not on a date, not officially. They weren't officially dating. They were just out on the town together night after 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 night. For whatever reason. Now, the problems here are twofold. One, that we have a president who has this issue with gender identity, who loves persecuting others who share his own gender identity as a way of overcompensating, and the fact that we have a person in the Oval Office for the second time who fell under the utter and absolute control of a Jewish organized crime group in his early 20s. Two presidents, both were put into office in elections where they, oddly enough, didn't win the majority vote, and where in both cases the exit polls were, in one case, 8 points away from the end vote, and the other one 11 points away, and the variation's never been more than 0.4%. Not 11%.
Points. I hadn't heard
11 points in exit polling.
Wow.
So we have our second president. The first one brought us 9/11, which, if you didn't know that Israeli and Saudi intelligence working with our neocon brothers were responsible for that, you're not paying attention, because I've seen all the documents and published them more than once. And if you don't think we're seeing something far more insidious, now George W. Bush went on a rampage against the enemies of global Zionism and killed at least 2 million people, or opened torture prisons around the world, began kidnapping cab drivers and old ladies and whatever off the street to pile up the numbers of terrorists that they caught. And then later, of course, the ones who survived being waterboarded or having their genitals hit with a car battery 4 or 5 times a day for 5 or 6 years were given a couple $100,000 and promised, like Trump's prom date, only tell them what we want. Just right. Here's what you have to say. As every woman that's ever been around Trump, tell them it was the best sex you ever had, or your mother's head's going to be on a stake.
Stormy won't say that yet. She filed another suit against him yesterday, or the day before.
Oh, yeah. Stormy's doing this. And what is it doing? Is it dominating news cycles where we should be talking about something else?
Stormy may end up like the D.C. madam if she's not careful. I think it's too late. She's on thin ice.
Or is the whole thing theater? And by the whole thing being theater, and part of Jeff's intro here as we move on. One of the other things we got this week, I had a chance a few years ago, and now Jeff, I think it was 2010 that a missile mysteriously jumped out of the water off Long Beach and soared into the air, an ICBM from.
I don't think it was that long ago.
We get the date right here, but
let me look.
When I had my guys, and you can pull this stuff up quicker than anyone. When I had my guys look at the video, first of all, they verified it was a submarine-launched ICBM, and then secondly, they identified by looking at the contrail and the color of the contrail, which was yellowish-brown, that it was a Chinese missile from a Chinese submarine that had gotten through all of our nets somehow. And there's a story behind this, a UFO story behind this. It's supposedly impossible to get 5 miles off the U.S. coast and launch a missile.
Gosh, wouldn't that be inside international water boundaries by about 7 miles?
Yeah, it was. But
what year did you say that was?
I thought it was 2010, maybe.
You're damn right it is.
Yeah.
Seems it wasn't that long ago, but yes.
We've known each other a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
Well, the issue is when the missile went up, By examining the contrail on the video, we have, and God only knows, we do have rocket scientists at VT. The color of the contrails identified that the engine is very primitive, the fuel is very primitive, only partially burned fuel, and it being a Chinese rocket. Well, the North Koreans, only 2 years ago, tried to send a missile over Japan, which is a couple hundred miles away, and every missile they sent up had a yellow-brown plume and blew up on the launch pad. Until this last year, they began sending up perfect white-plumed missiles made with rocket engines supplied to them by the United States, engines the U.S. bought from Russia for its own space program and sent to North Korea to supply their program, making this entire theater with North Korea that we're watching play out, every bit of it, fake.
Wow. Here's your top Korean headlines today. Trump will keep all American troops and their nuclear weapons in South Korea, even if a peace treaty is signed by North Korea. Gosh. Number 2, U.S. committed to dismantling North Korean nuclear program without delay, says Mike Pompeo.
You mean taking our nuclear weapons back?
Looks like it.
Yeah, because they're all ours in the first place.
And money back guarantee, MBG. North Korea releases U.S. detainees, bowing to another Trump demand.
Oh, my God, yes.
Peace in North Korea. Maybe not if the U.S. has its way. And finally, Kim shoves photographer out of wife's way at summit. There you go. Fully up to date.
And while this is going on, if you don't think Trump is doing to us what Roy Cohn did to him over and over and over and over and over in New York, and at times down in the basement of Studio 54, you just aren't paying attention.
Didn't I tell you that nothing like these campfire candlelight stories? Nowhere on radio will you hear anything approaching this. Thank you, Gordy. Make sure the night detail outside is doubled.
Well, I'm taking him some hot chocolate right now.
All right. You take care of yourself. Thank you. That was a vintage performance. Talk to you soon.
Good night, Jeff.
Night. Nowhere else on radio will you hear things like this. Up to you. Make of it what you will, and we will be right back.